Sir,
Yes.
sir, can we walk into your contact hours today at 1?
Today I have something else. So today I won't be able to. Um, Next week I can give you extra contact hours next week, right? Apart from the usual Tuesday slot, I can give you another slot next week. Would that be okay, or is it too urgent?
No, sir. Okay, noted. We can meet next week.
Okay. This week is a little packed for me, and I have other things this afternoon, so I'll just reschedule it. Yeah.
Okay, okay, sir.
Okay. So let me share the screen. Okay. Any quick questions before I start? Let me do one thing. Um, all right. Any questions? So I'll tie up the topic on choice theory and consumer demand. Spend a
Sir,
little, yes.
excuse me, sir. Sir, can you please explain the last slide on conventionalism once again?
Consequentialism.
Yeah, consequentialism.
Okay, so here's the point. Um, in the framework that we have built, yes, um, utility is a function of the agent's vector of consumptions, right? Now, it doesn't have to be the agent's own vector of consumptions, right? You can extend the same framework to include the consumption of others, right? Uh, so this framework that we're using accommodates a certain kind of other regarding preferences, right? It is not constrained to only make us think about selfish agents. So you can easily write down a utility function where my utility is a function of my consumption vector as well as yours and somebody else's, right? A poor person's consumption vector. Um, in this example, what we see is that Laurel doesn't merely care about who gets to consume how much, right? Uh, Take the allocation or the consumption vector that Laurel himself gets the small cake and Hardy gets the big cake, all right? Um, Now, if Laurel himself created the division, he is happy. He doesn't mind, right? Because he acted generously and took the small cake himself. So he's okay with that outcome. But the same allocation, the same consumption vector affects him differently if Hardy, his friend, created that division, right? If Hardy gave him the small cake, then he's very upset. So this example illustrates a situation where Laurel's utility is not merely a function of their consumption vectors, who gets to eat how much, right? It is dependent on something else, which is how this allocation, this consumption vector came about, right? What was the process through which it came about? So that's why, in this case, Laurel's preference is not consequentialist. It does not just depend on the outcome or the final consumption vector. It also depends on what process led to that. So that was the point of this example, that the framework that we are studying is not so narrow that it cannot capture non-selfish behavior or non-selfish preferences, right? We can extend it to a certain kind of other regarding preference, namely what Amartya Sen calls sympathy, which is just caring about how much others are consuming. But it is incapable of capturing the spirit of this example, where Laurel cares not only about the consumption of others, but how that consumption came about. Who created it? What was the process which led to it?
Sir?
Yes.
So in the last sentence, it's written, Hardy's preference doesn't depend on the consequence alone. Shouldn't it be Laurel, according to the example?
Yes. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem, sir.
Yeah, there are a little typos here and there, which, yes, it's Laurel's. Thanks. Okay, let me to talk a little bit more about some of the other things. So I didn't talk about the Pizza Hut.
No, sir.
Okay.
No, sir.
Okay, I talked about this. Now let me talk about framing effect. Kahneman and Tversky, they're two psychologists, right, who did a series of experiments which illustrate that people don't always behave according to the tenets and assumptions of this sort of choice theory, that there are departures from it, anomalies, if you will. Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize, and Amos Tversky would have won it, except that he passed away by then. So that was unfortunate. So this is one of Kahneman and Tversky's examples. Kahneman has written a book. What's it called? Thinking Fast and Slow. Some title of that sort, right? It's a non-technical.
Yes, sir. That's the one.
It's a non-technical, very readable book, which talks about many of these anomalies. So you can take a look at it if you're interested. So this was one of their examples that they posed. Guys, please mute yourselves. I can hear a lot of crows from somebody's microphone. Can everybody check that you're on mute? Okay, great. So decision problem one. Okay, people are asked, a subject pool, that imagine yourself to be a doctor and you have a choice between two treatments. So 600 people have been affected by a disease.
Sir?
Yes.
So can you please remove the sidebar that shows the participants? The slide is not completely visible because of it.
Is it better now?
No, sir. It's still.
No,
very
sir, you can
No,
just
sir.
minimize it using the first symbol that you are getting. No, sir, just click on this.
I know, but I mean,
Yes, sir, now it's
how
fine.
about this?
No, sir.
Yes, sir,
Yeah?
it's fine.
Okay, so let's try that, because otherwise it becomes a little too disembodied. Yeah. Okay. So decision problem one, that there are two courses of treatment, right? In treatment A, 200 people will be saved. In treatment B, everyone is saved with probability 1/3, and no one is saved with probability 2/3, right? And people are asked to choose between them. You can pause for a moment and reflect. What would your choice be? What does your instinct say, right? There's of course no correct answer. It's a matter of preference. It turns out that, and maybe you can find support for it from introspection, that a strong majority of people choose A over B. They choose to save 200 people for sure, rather than saving everyone with probably 1/3. Yes. Now, they asked gave another choice. So basically, they randomly divided their subjects into two groups. One group was given the first choice. The second group was given the second choice, which is that, it was phrased like this, that there are two courses of treatment, C and D. On a treatment C, 400 people will die. And on a treatment D, everyone dies with probably 2/3 and no one dies with probably 1/3, right? What would you choose? And again, you can reflect and check your own instinct. But a vast majority choose D over C, 78%, right? And the idea is that if your subject pool is large, and you have randomly divided them into two groups, then idiosyncratic differences in preferences should cancel out, and you should see the same average preference in the two groups. Yes. But then once you look at this, there's a problem, because after all, C is just a restatement of A. It's stated differently, right? A is stated in terms of saving people. C is stated in terms of letting people die, right? But they're essentially the same choices, just the language chosen has been different. This has a positive phrasing and this has a negative phrasing. And similarly, B and D are basically identical, right? They only differ in language, not in terms of, what happens. So what does this illustrate? This illustrates that people's preferences between two options may depend on how those options have been described, right? There's no suppression of information over here. All the information is available. It's just that the language and the connotation is different in the two cases, right?
So,
So
but
this, yeah.
it's not entirely framing effect because the number of people is different in both the cases.
No. In both cases, they have been told that there are 600 people altogether. So
Oh,
200 people
yeah.
saved means 400 people will die.
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, I have a small question.
Yeah.
Sir, in these cases, the average states are going to be the same for the treatments that we are comparing. But nonetheless, if we were to look at all the states for each treatment, I mean, they will nonetheless be different. For treatment A, there's just going to be one state, which is 200 people will be saved. But treatment B will have the average state that is going to be the same as treatment A. But there will nonetheless be two extreme states where everyone is saved and no one is saved.
Sure. I mean,
so we're comparing just the average states and stating that they're equivalent. Would that be correct?
No. Nobody's saying that people should view A and B as equivalent. Not at all. As you just said, the difference between A and B is that B has more variance, right? In both cases, the expected number of people saved is 200 between A and B, right? In A, it's 200 for sure. With probability 1, it's 200. In B, there's a variance. It's just in expectation that it's 200. So there's absolutely no reason to think that people should be indifferent between these two options. Nobody's saying that, right? People can have, for example, risk-averse attitudes, and they might say, okay, I'll rather save these many people with a guarantee instead of taking a gamble where everybody could die with some probability. I mean, people are free to prefer A over B or B over A. We are not comparing we are not saying A and B should be equivalent or C and D should be equivalent. We are saying decision problem 1 and decision problem 2 are equivalent.
Okay, sir.
Right. And so then if people were rational in the sense of our model, then we should see if 72% chose A over B, we would expect 72% to choose C over D, but only 22% do so.
Okay, sir.
That's the puzzle. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So that creates a problem, and that creates a problem for us economists and choice theorists. It creates it makes advertisement professionals very happy, right? That means that you can, for the same identical object that you're trying to sell, the way you place it in front of people, right? Even without giving information or suppressing information, just the language that you use might affect people's choices. Yeah. Now, that is not captured in a framework, obviously, right? X is X, Y is Y. Our consumers know exactly what they are choosing, and their preferences are stable. They're not so fickle. They're not affected by framing effect.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, where does this 72% 78% come from in that
From
previous
actual
slide?
experiments, right? So this kind of thing has been presented to subjects in a lot of different studies.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, and I think this comes from some meta study which collated the information from several studies, if I remember correctly. I forget the exact reference where I got the numbers from, but basically this come from actual lab experiments with real subjects expressing a preference.
Okay, sir.
Okay, let me talk about this other experiment. So people were, this study sort of did an experiment in Pizza Hut. Okay, and so Pizza Hut gave out a deal that you can pay $3 as an entry fee, and once you enter, you can eat as much pizza as you like. You won't be charged any extra. Once you pay the entry fee, it's all free inside. Now, people came in, and then a randomly chosen half of the subject pool were refunded the entry fee. Right after they came in, they were told that your name, it came up in a lottery. You hit the lucky number, so we are refunding the $3 to you. Okay. In both cases, whether there was a refund or not, the rest of the deal was the same, that you can eat as much pizza as you like. Each extra slice has a zero marginal cost, right? Now, this is a classic example of a sunk cost. Once you're inside, whatever you paid at the gate, whether it was $3 or $0, right? For some it was $0, for some it was $3. Whatever you paid is water under the bridge. You've already paid it, right? So it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't affect your decisions going forward, right? For a rational decision maker, sunk costs shouldn't matter, right? That's a fundamental kind of principle of rationality that we can claim. So what the study wanted to see is whether between the two groups, there was any difference in terms of how much pizza they ate, right? And it turns out that those who got a refund ate less pizza. Those who didn't get a refund, whose gate fee was effectively $3, ate much more, right? So that violates the sunk cost principle, that sunk costs should be ignored in decision making. You can, the sunk cost principle seems to be violated in many spheres. So suppose you have got a ticket to a game, right? Some final IPL final, let's say, and so there are two cases. One in which you got the ticket for free; somebody gave it to you as a gift, and in the second case, you paid a lot of money to buy the ticket. Yes. And then on the day of the match, as you're about to leave for the stadium, the weather turns very bad, right? And road conditions are hazardous. There's a storm. And you're wondering whether to go to the match or not. And suppose you can't resell the ticket, it's too late, right? If you don't go, the ticket will just be wasted. Now, should it matter whether you paid your own money to buy the ticket or whether you got it for free? It shouldn't, right? Because again, it's a sunk cost. It shouldn't. But if you think about it, many of us would probably be more prone to go if we paid 5,000 rupees to buy the ticket. Don't you think?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes.
In the stock market, people often say, oh, I bought this stock for for 100 rupees. And then some news broke out that, this company is in trouble. They are defaulting on their loans. Their assets may be impounded, etc. So you bought it for 100 rupees and now the stock price has fallen to 60 rupees. And people often say that, well, how can I sell it for 60 rupees? I bought it for 100. I'm taking such a big hit, so much loss. I'll wait for it to rebound. Well, how much you bought it for, whether you bought it for 100 or 50, should not affect your decision, really. Yes. All that should matter is that sitting today, when the stock price is 60, do you expect it to go down further or do you expect it to rebound? That's all that should matter. What was your buying price is absolutely irrelevant to your decision, right? But if you talk to people who have money in stocks, they'll often express this sentiment. They often see, how much they bought it for often seems to loom large in their consciousness. And that's, again, a sunk cost fallacy. They're falling prey to sunk costs, which they should really ignore if they're rational. So in the real world, our agents don't always stick to the assumptions that we impose on them.
So that experiment wherein we talk about like people focusing on loss reduction rather than like their gain maximization, is
Right.
it consistent with sunk cost, or this is a concept that doesn't apply there?
No, that's a different kind of anomaly. That's a different kind of anomaly. Yes, broadly speaking, I mean, I haven't talked about choice under uncertainty yet. I'll come to that topic. But what you're referring to, if I'm right, you're referring to what is called reference-dependent preferences, that I am sitting on a certain amount of wealth. I have a very different attitude towards losses versus gains. Yes. I'll come to that. I need to set up a few notions of choice under uncertainty, like risk aversion and so on, before we can talk productively about that. But that's different. Yes, that's not sunk cost. Losses, gains both lie in the future, whereas sunk costs lie in the past and cannot be recovered.
All right, sir.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Sir, why does the stock market example violate sunk cost fallacy? Because our entire purpose of investing in stock markets is to make profits, right?
Once you're bought, here's why. Once you've bought the stock already, yes?
Yes, sir.
You've already spent that money, right? So what you paid to acquire the stock, that money is not going to come back. And now you're...
Right, sir.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to say is when you're trading in stocks, you will take into account how much you've bought it for, right? Because that will determine whether you'll make profits or losses.
No, why should it matter? Again, take two situations, two scenarios, right? You're holding 20 shares of some company, yeah? Nirav Modi's company, right? You bought the stock before all the scandal broke out, yeah? You have 20 shares. Take two cases. In one case, you bought the shares at market price yourself, 100 rupees a share. Second scenario, You did some consultancy for the company and they paid you with shares. You got it as a gift, right? Does it matter whether you bought it from the market with your money or that the shares were given to you free? It shouldn't matter, right?
So I think it
Yes,
should,
sir.
right?
Say that again.
Because if you are given the shares in like as a gift,
Yeah,
then even if a company suffers a little loss, but then
yeah,
also on an average on the net you would make a gain because you
Exactly,
haven't
sir.
paid
Because
any.
you wouldn't have invested your own money in that. So even if you're selling it at a price less than a market price, your initial investment was nil if you're getting it as a gift.
that's fine.
So
But whatever money you paid, whether it was zero or the market price for those shares, that money you've already paid. Somebody else pocketed that money, right? The guy who sold you those shares and has gone away. So that money you're not going to get back. So today the share price is 60 rupees, okay? And suppose your research tells you that it'll fall further to, let's say, 40 rupees in a couple of weeks. Suppose you're convinced about that. Then even if then if you don't sell, if you still hold out, that means you'll add to your losses. You bought it at 100, today it's at 60. If you sell today, you'll lose 40 rupees a share. If you wait further, you're going to lose 60 rupees a share. So you cut your losses, you minimize your losses by selling today. That's the right thing to do. Now, if you expect the stock price to rebound, today it's at 60, you expect in 2 weeks it'll go up to 70. Then you should hold out no matter what, whether you got it for free or whether you bought it for 100 rupees. Right? So, yes, if you sell, you'll make losses. You spend some, big money to buy those shares. But if all available information tells you it's going to fall further, that it's going down, then minimize your losses. Just sell. Why would you wait? You'll just add to your losses if you wait. Right? So I'm not saying whether buying or selling is the right thing if the price is at 60. I'm saying whether you should buy or sell should depend only on what you think about the future direction of the stock price. And it should be absolutely unaffected by what your buying price was.
Sir,
Yeah.
so I had a question, sir,
Mm.
that in this case, according to the examples which were given on the slide,
Mm.
so the real situation may or may not be in accordance with the theoretical situation. That's what we are trying to say in the case of sunk costs.
Yeah. That's right. That's exactly right. Right?
Okay, sir.
In this kind of theoretical framework that we are using, there's no room for agents suffering from the sunk cost fallacy, right? In situations involving sunk costs, they always ignore it, according to our theory. I'm just pointing out in the real world that doesn't always happen, right? There are other theories that people have developed in economics, right, to address these sorts of situations. So it's not that there are no other models or theories which don't try to account for this, but the sort of classical rational choice model that we're using doesn't use it, doesn't do it. So it's a warning label, right? I've sold you a product, the classical choice theory model, and I could be in legal trouble if I don't give you all the warning labels. So that's what I'm doing. This I talked about, right? So there are other regarding preferences, yes? Now, again, one kind of other regarding preference is very easy to incorporate in this framework, no trouble at all. In fact, the framework imposes no limitations, which is when we intrinsically care about, the consumption and welfare of others, right? But sometimes the way we care about others is complex, and it's not just so straightforward as saying that, I do care about how much whether poor people are being well fed or getting a proper education, poor children, right? It's more conditional and complex than that. One example of that is already there in this cake division example that I talked about, right? That you care about the consumption of yourself and others in a non-consequentialist way, where you care about the process. There's some other examples. Envy, where you may care about relative shares, for example. So let me show you a little clip. Okay, I'll show you a little video clip. All right.
And we did that originally with.
Can you hear the sound from the video?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is a famous experiment on capuchin monkeys. Yeah, and the speaker is Franz D. Wall. He's a very famous primatologist who has studied, chimpanzees and monkeys and so on, studied their behavior, and he has some popular books in which he describes all of that, and they're wonderful. So let me play the clip for you, and then we'll see.
Capuchin monkeys, and I'm going to show you the first experiment that we did. It has now been done with dogs and with birds and with chimpanzees, but with Sarah Brosnan we started out with capuchin monkeys. So what we did is we put two capuchin monkeys side by side. Again, these animals, they live in a group, they know each other. We take them out of the group, put them in a test chamber, and there's a very simple task that they need to do. And if you give both of them cucumber for the task, the two monkeys side by side, they're perfectly willing to do this 25 times in a row. So cucumber, even though it's really only water in my opinion, but cucumber is perfectly fine for them. Now, if you give the partner grapes, the food preferences of my capuchin monkeys correspond exactly with the prices in the supermarket. And so if you give them grapes, that's a far better food, then you create inequity between them. So that's the experiment we did. Recently, we videotaped it with new monkeys who had never done the task, thinking that maybe they would have a stronger reaction, and that turned out to be right. The one on the left is the monkey who gets cucumber. The one on the right is the one who gets grapes. The one who gets cucumber, note that the first piece of cucumber is perfectly fine. The first piece she eats. Then she sees the other one getting grape, and you will see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber. She tests the rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again. So this is basically the Wall Street protest that you see here.
Okay. So what did you think of that? So the same commodity, cucumber, turns from a good to a bad when the other monkey is given something nice, something nicer, right? So it kind of illustrates that often we care about relative consumption, right? And it's not that, in a straightforward way, something is a good. There's a lot of comparison that is involved. In human contexts, there's a very famous game which has been played countless times in the lab called the Ultimatum Game. So let me tell you how this game goes and what they found when they made people play this game. There are two players. Usually they are.
I'm sorry, Professor. Can you move this sidebar again?
Okay. Oops.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So the ultimatum goes like this. You know, the people are randomly selected and randomly paired. So if you're a subject, you don't know who you're playing with. You don't, you know, that's some anonymous person sitting in another computer terminal. So one of the players is assigned to be the proposer, the other is assigned to be the receiver, and they're given some pot of money, right? They jointly have some amount of money, and the proposer is asked to propose a division. So they're given 100 rupees jointly, and the proposer is to say, okay, you know, I'll take 60 rupees and you take 40 rupees, right? And then the receiver can say yes or no. So I'm the proposer, I propose 60-40, you're the receiver. If you say yes, that division will be carried out. We'll go home with 60 and 40 respectively. But if you say no, then the whole deal is off, and basically we go home empty-handed. None of us get any money, right? Those are the rules of the game. So if everyone was a money-minded rationalist, that is to say that people just were interested in maximize their own individual earnings from this experiment, right? Then what would be the split? The split should be that the proposer gets practically everything. So there's 100 rupees on the table. I say, okay, I'll take 99 rupees. You take 1 rupee, right? And you may be very upset and you may give me a lot of galis, but if you say yes, you go home with 1 rupee. If you say no, you go home with nothing. So 1 rupee is better, so you'll go home with that. And anticipating that, I, being another rationalist, should propose a very uneven, very extreme division, right? I take practically everything. I propose to take practically everything and propose to give you just the crumbs, right? When you actually do this experiment, what you find is that median offers are 40% of the pot, right? Most of the offers are very close to the offer of dividing it almost equally, yes? And in the few cases where the receiver is offered 30% or less of the pot, the rejection rates are really very high. Most of those offers are rejected, actually. So people will cut off their nose to spite their face, right? They'll reject money for themselves if they think that the other side has been very unfair, right? Now, why is this difficult to incorporate in our framework? Because this is violating the monotonicity axiom, right? You could write down a utility function where my utility depends on my earnings and your earnings. I may care about both. But if you impose monotonicity, then you cannot explain or rationalize this observation, right? That if I care about my earnings in a monotonic fashion, that more money is better for me, then why am I rejecting these offers? Yeah. So once again, we have to go beyond this kind of simple framework of utility, these simple utility functions to address issues like this. Question? So let me talk about one last anomaly or departure from this. And I won't flesh it out here. Let me just briefly touch upon it. And then if I have time, I'll come back to this in the end. And I'll show you an alternative modeling approach which tries to capture this. So there's the Um, um, there's a story in Greek mythology of Odysseus and the Sirens, right? This is the great epic, the Odyssey. And one of the stories there is Odysseus, the hero, after the war, going back to his country. And along the way, they passed the island of the Sirens, right? And they knew the stories about this island. So there were these singers, these sirens on the island who were wonderful singers. They sang so well that anybody who heard the music had to immediately rush to the island to hear more, right? It was just captivating and mesmerizing. But the sirens enslaved anybody who came to the island, right? So everybody knew this. Odysseus knew this. So what did Odysseus do? Odysseus knew that if they were passing and they heard, then he and his sailors would have will have to rush to the island and they'll become slaves after that. So he didn't want that. So he poured wax into the ears of his sailors, right? So that they couldn't hear anything. And he was very greedy. So he wanted to have his cake and eat it too. So he didn't want to seal off his ears. So what did he do? Anybody know the story?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
He asked crew to tie him to the
Yeah.
pole
So
and
he asked his crew to tie him to the mast so that he didn't have the freedom to run away. And he didn't have wax in his ears. So he heard the music. He was dying to go off there, but he had closed off that option for himself, right? So he limited his own options. That's the crux of it. Yeah. Now, the kind of agent that we have modeled will never want to limit his own options, right? More choices are always better. At worst, the extra options you won't find attractive and you won't pick any of those, but you can never be hurt by having extra options according to this sort of framework. But the story of Odysseus illustrates where Odysseus didn't want to have a larger choice set. He actually preferred a smaller choice set, and that's what he did by tying himself to the mast. Yes. So how does that happen? If you think of many other kinds of things, procrastination, for example, that you have a term paper which you have to do, or you have to study for a course. Every day you tell yourself that, well, today I'll go and hang out with my friends. Today I'll watch this movie. Today I'll go out to eat. From tomorrow I'll be very, very serious, right? From tomorrow I'm going to just spend 10 hours a day studying for my upcoming midterm. But tomorrow comes and again you push it back to day after tomorrow. Now, procrastination is different from laziness or other phenomena like this. Laziness can be time consistent, right? Somebody says that, oh, I don't care if I score badly on my test, right? I like to have fun. I like to, and have to chill out with my friends. I'll sacrifice some marks. Big deal. That's not a recommendation. I'm saying somebody could have a preference like that, right? But procrastination is where you see an internal conflict within a person, right? A person says, oh, I do want to finish that project. I do want to finish that term paper and do it well. I do want to score well on the test, right? Is constantly trying to do those things, but is unable to, all right? Exercise or dieting, right? Somebody says that, well, I'll eat all my pakoras and all my oily stuff and fried stuff. I'll live life in the moment, right? Yeah, then 10 years from now, I may have clogged arteries, but who cares? I want to live in the moment. And, that's one thing, right? You may want to criticize that person. You may want to advise that person, but that person has stable preferences. That person, you could say, has a low discount factor, right? Current pleasure carries more weight than future health consequences. But somebody else says, no, I want to go on a diet. I want to control my diet. I want to go to the gym and exercise regularly. I want to stay fit. But every day that person says, oh, let me have my last samosa, right? From tomorrow, I'm not touching samosas. Or says that, oh, I don't feel like going to the gym today. You know, the weather is so lousy. From tomorrow, I'll be very, very regular. But tomorrow never comes, right? So that sort of behavior is different from pure laziness or pure kind of living in the moment kind of sentiment. One illustration of this is, again, captured in an experiment, right? So here are two choice problems. First, focus on problem one. People are asked, of these, which do you prefer, right? So you have, let's say, won some sort of, a prize in a game show. And there are two forms of payouts. One is you receive a big prize right away. Let's say rupees 1 lakh. Or if you wait till next week, you will get that 1 lakh plus a little bonus of 100 rupees. Yes. So which would you like? That's one choice. The other choice is pushing back both of these options by a year, right? So you can choose between receiving 1 lakh a year from now versus receiving rupees 1 lakh and 100 rupees a year and 1 week from now, right? So just a year of time lag has been added to the first two options. And again, if you do these experiments, you find that, if you ask a large number of people and randomly divide them into two groups, one group is asked problem one, the other group is asked problem two. Most people in group one prefer A to B, most people in group two prefer D to C, right? So it's fair to say that the typical person will, at the same time, prefer A to B and D to C, okay? But that creates a problem. So when you are in situation, when you're asked to choose between C and D, okay, and you say, okay, I'll choose D, yeah, what difference does it make? 1 year and, versus 1 year plus 1 week. So let me just go for the bigger amount. Yeah. So you choose D. And then let's say 1 year passes. Okay. So the option you have chosen is just a week away. And if they come back to you and let you revisit your choice, right? You chose D, 1 year passed, and then they ask you, oh, you chose to receive 1 lakh and 100 rupees, and that's a week away from now. But if we can pay you a lakh right now if you give up the 100 rupees. Okay, so if you're given that choice in the future, 1 year down the line, then you will end up switching, right? Because you prefer A to B. So then you say, okay, give me the money now. And I'll skip the 100 rupees. So, and if you're self-aware, then you will be able to see this in advance that you're going to switch your choice, right? And so 1 year before all of this, what you want to do is something you won't be able to implement, right? So this is called time inconsistency, that your preference is not kind of stable over time. What you prefer today conflicts with what you will prefer tomorrow and what you will prefer day after tomorrow. So it's almost as if there are multiple persons inside you and they have different preferences and they get the switch, they get the steering wheel at different points in time. And they're almost fighting with each other and trying to outguess each other and trying to manipulate each other. Yes. So there's a model, even something like this, which seems highly tricky and problematic, has been modeled. And it's a model with what is called hyperbolic discounting. So I will skip that for now and jump to more conventional stuff. And if I have time, I will come back and show you this model of which tries to capture behavior preference like this, so that it may be called behavioral economics, although I don't like that term. So just to give you a flavor of some more modern stuff, I'll show you that model, time permitting. Any questions?
Sir, can you please explain the difference between laziness and procrastination once again?
So going to the gym, all right? case A, I'm just lazy, right? You come and ask me, hey, you should go to the gym. You should try to stay fit. I say, nah, there's some nice movies on Netflix. I'll just stay at home and be on my couch and watch Netflix. I don't feel like going to the gym. You try to persuade me. You say that, look, as you get older, if you're not doing this exercise, you'll have clogged arteries and you'll have all kinds of health problems, heart conditions. You really shouldn't do this. I tell you that who cares? I will enjoy today rather than worry about my health 10 years down the line. Right? That's what my preference is. So I'm a lazy person in this case. Yes. I'm at peace that I don't want to do the hard work and I want to enjoy myself. I'll pay a cost in the future, but so be it. Yes. This is different from the procrastinator. The procrastinator says, so you come and tell me, and I say, yes, you're right, and I really want to stay fit and go to the gym, but tomorrow. From tomorrow, I promise I'll pick myself up and not be a couch potato, and I'll go to the gym regularly. But today I don't feel like it. Just give me a break today. And then tomorrow I say the same thing, and day after tomorrow I say the same thing. So that is different. The lazy person said, no, I'm not going tomorrow. I'm not going day after tomorrow. And now I'm not going today. I'm fine with it. Procrastinator says, no, from tomorrow, I want to be disciplined. I want to do put in the yards. I want to do the hard work. I just want an out today, an exception today. That's the difference, right?
So basically,
sir,
a
got
lazy
it.
person
Thank you,
always
sir.
says no, and a procrastinator never says no.
The procrastinator just says no for right now. If you ask the procrastinator, what is your plan tomorrow and day after, and what would you like to do? Not just today, but sort of over time. And the procrastinator says, no, I do want to exercise. I do want to eat healthy. I do want to finish my tasks, my projects, and so on. There are lots of people, actual data shows, who buy gym memberships and don't use them. They pay a lot of money and then they don't use it. So what does that tell you? I mean, if somebody pays big money for a gym membership and doesn't go there for a year, that shows an internal conflict, right? Somebody who was at peace with his preferences wouldn't even bother to go buy the gym membership. So this person who bought it really intended to go, but never ended up doing it. And it's widespread. It's widespread, this sort of behavior. People have these virtuous subscriptions and they hardly use it. So that shows an internal tussle. Somebody who never bothered, didn't pay at all for the membership, never went, has stable preferences. Somebody who bought the gym membership and didn't go has an internal turmoil.
So is it correct to say that laziness is the more consistent choice?
Yes. Laziness is time consistent. Procrastination is not.
Oh.
Yeah. There was this sign which I once saw. The meeting of the Procrastination Society has been postponed indefinitely. Right? So they arrange for meetings, they arrange for
Sir, here in this example, in the given example,
yeah.
Sir, what's the rationale behind choosing A over B and D over C? Like most people answer this. What's the rationale behind?
That's how most people's preferences are. That's what they express their preferences to be, right? What's the reason? I mean, you have to ask them. But this is, I mean, you can identify with this, right? I mean, procrastination is exactly that. That, so that you have a project, a term paper due next week, let's say. and I tell you, what's your plan? Are you planning to put in a lot of hours on this term paper? And you say, yes, of course, yeah, I mean, yeah. So if the term paper is due on Friday and on Monday I ask you and you say, yeah, absolutely, I really want to do well. I really want to work hard on this. I really want to get high marks on this. Yeah. And then on Monday, you find some excuse to not work on it. You say, from tomorrow, I'll just, really burn the midnight oil and work on it. And then on Tuesday again, you don't do it and say, from Wednesday, I'll go all out. And on Wednesday, you say, from Thursday, I mean, I'm not going to sleep 24 hours, just work on this. And then in the end, it doesn't happen. Right? So that's procrastination for you. Now, why do people do? I mean, that's how often their preferences and choices turn out to be. That's a phenomenon we observe, right?
Okay.
So can you explain how the Odysseus example is time inconsistent?
Time inconsistent because before he hears the music, right, his choice over, before he hears the music, he prefers his freedom to the music. Yes, the music is wonderful, but being a slave is not worth it. That's too high a price to pay to hear the music, right? But once the music reaches his ears, that preference flips. That's why people rush to the island to hear more of that music. Yes, so that's how it's time inconsistent. Once the music reaches their ears, they will even willingly embrace slavery to hear the music more.
But was that decision by choice, or was it was something that happened? Did they choose to go to the island, or they just got attracted?
No, so the story says that this has happened in the past to a lot of travelers. So the typical person shows this sort of preference, that once they hear the music, they just cannot resist it. They rush there. So Odysseus guessed that that's how he will also feel once the music reaches his ears. Right? Let's take that as a given.
Oh.
Or there's past data on a lot of travelers who exactly did that. Right? And so Odysseus imagines that his future self will have flip preferences. But right now, he doesn't like that. Right now, his preferences are freedom over music.
All right.
Sir,
Yes.
does this time inconsistency problem happens because of the nature of product, or is it because we're humans?
Well, it's some interaction between the two, obviously, right? If the music was elevator music, he probably wouldn't have rushed there, right? So there was some intrinsic merit to the music, I suppose. The Sirens were great musicians. But it's also, I mean, maybe a Martian wouldn't fall into that sort of trap and that kind of flip-flopping. So yeah, it's an interaction between the intrinsic quality of the product and the psychology of the agent who's choosing.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so let me switch to theory of the firm, right? And I'm going to go through this more quickly. I have 15 minutes. I have to rush. Much of the theory of the firm is, similar to consumer theory with a little bit more. And so I'm not going to go through it. I'm going to just rush through it, right, and get it done with and get to the next topic. Yes.
Sir, can you please switch it to full screen mode?
Yes, I'm doing that. I'm doing that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. All right. So let me say a few things by way of introduction. So we looked at consumers and households and how they choose and various issues involved there. So they are the source of demand in a product market. The source of supply is another bunch of entities, the firms. So we need to study their decision making in a little more detail. And so that's what we're going to do. Now, we're going to study the classical theory of the firm, right? Of course, there's a huge literature. And if you take courses like industrial organization, or I believe there's something called the theory of the firm, there are your optional second year courses, which delve into all of this in a lot more detail, right? But I'll just put a few pointers here just for you to be aware before we get into the bread and butter theory of the firm, right? The sort of, which is a starting point almost. Now, if you think of the modern firm, the typical modern firm, often it's like a big corporate entity, right? It's a large organization with thousands of workers, yeah. And the running assumption in this kind of theory that we're going to build is that the firm's objective is to maximize profits, yes. It's a profit maximizing firm. Now, if you look around, there will obviously be lots of exceptions. We will have, for example, in India, we have lots of PSUs, public sector undertakings. Many of our big banks, they are kind of hybrid. They are, partly owned by the government, often with majority shares, and partly owned by the public. And but you have Indian Railways, for example. Yes. Indian Railways is clearly not a profit maximizer. How do we know that? Is there an obvious indication why Indian Railways certainly isn't maximizing profits, whatever it is doing otherwise?
It's
Looking
owned
at
by the government.
Public good.
social max.
Sorry?
It's a public good.
No, I mean, it's not a pure public good because tickets are being sold, right? To get on a train, you need to buy a ticket. So in principle,
सर टिकट के प्राइसेस नहीं बढ़ते हैं जबकि टिकट सोल्ड आउट काफी क्विकली होता है
हाँ,
तो
that's
इनका इक्विलिब्रियम पॉइंट
right,
काफी
right.
मतलब इक्विलिब्रियम पॉइंट से काफी दूर है ये लोग
Equilibrium नहीं वो they have an opportunity. See, a profit maximizer, if there's a seller selling at a certain price and there's excess demand at that price for that seller's product, then the seller obviously has an opportunity to raise the price at least a little bit, right? And Indian Railways isn't doing that, right? And so obviously there are other concerns that it has apart from profits, maybe social.
सर गवर्नमेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस तो प्रॉफिट कमाती नहीं है ना मतलब वो तो सरप्लस कमाती हैं अगर कमाती है तो
हाँ,
means no government organization actually earn profit, they usually earn surplus.
Well, some of them do make profits, like the oil companies, Indian Oil and all, have good profits. Now, you could say that, well, because they're government organizations, they're sort of they probably have other non-profit motives. But I'm saying if you want to sort of be sure about that, in the case of Indian Railways, their pricing policies tells us that that profit is not their be-all and end-all because they don't raise prices even when there's a lot of excess demand. Now, there may be other kinds of entities. We have all kinds of NGOs, for example, right? Which one big sector where the NGOs play a role is microfinance in the credit market, right? Giving loans to poor people. And many of the organizations, the microfinance institutions which give loans are NGOs. They are not run on a profit basis. Anyway, be that as it may, and there are models and theories and approaches which try to incorporate these kinds of organizations. Yes, but lots of different firms are probably more profit driven, so it's not irrelevant what we are studying.
Sir, what are vanity projects?
you take the IPL teams, for example. What is Shah Rukh Khan doing with Kolkata Knight Riders? What do you think his objective function is? To make as much profit as possible. Maybe not. I mean, we often very rich people buy sports teams partly for the glory, maybe, yeah, to profit maximization may sometimes mean that you aim for the sort of middle of the table, or maybe in the top 1/3. That'll maybe maximize profits. But trying to be the champion would require buying big stars with big money, and that may not be profit maximizing. So there may be a conflict between glory maximization and profit maximization, right, in sports teams. Now, we don't know what their objectives are. It's plausible that these very rich people are not buying sports teams purely as a business. Maybe they want to sort of, enjoy the thrill of winning championships.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So vanity projects is where you buy a sports team to bolster your image as a winner or something like that. There's the Netflix series called Bad Boy Billionaires. Anybody saw it?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
One episode is on Malya and Vijay Malya.
Yeah, he bought the Formula One team.
Yeah, and IPL team and the Formula One team. And there's a sort of suggestion in the documentary, their take that, sort of he bled money on these projects because it sort of portrayed his image as a flamboyant businessman, and maybe that was partly responsible for the collapse of Kingfisher. Now, Ronald Coase once made a point that that this sort of, we tend to talk in this sort of binaries that, there are market economies and then there are socialist economies. But if you think about it, firms, interaction between firms is through the market, right? So Maruti is buying tires from, what's a good tire company? What's it called? Goodyear or something? Anyway, so a car company is buying tires from a tire manufacturer. There are two firms are interacting through markets, and there's a price mechanism there. But within the firm, there's a lot of resource allocation which is happening, right? Within Maruti, there's resources are being allocated between the marketing division, the product division, the advertising division, and so on. And that allocation is not done through the price mechanism. That allocation is done by a top-down, the CEO and the CFO is making those allocation decisions. So inside the firm, it looks almost like a command and control socialist economy. All the resource allocation that's happening within a firm, right? And because modern firms are so big, these are almost like big socialist islands floating around in a market economy, right? And one of the questions that Coase raised is that, what are the economic forces which determine the boundary of the firm or the size of these socialist islands? So for example, if you look at, compare the auto sector in America versus Japan, right? Compare companies like Ford and General Motors with Toyota and Honda. The Japanese companies do a lot more outsourcing, right? A lot of their parts are bought from other firms, their suppliers. Whereas the American companies in Detroit tend to do most of it in-house, even the small parts like rear view mirrors or the seats, they'll tend to make in-house instead of buying it from suppliers. So what is different between America and Japan, which led to this sort of, drawing the boundary at different places? That was the question which Coase raised. So that's an interesting set of things which they study in theory of the firm or industrial organization. We won't get into those issues, right? A very big aspect is that if you think of, the early days of capitalism, most firms were owner managed, right? So there's a little grocery store, let's say. So the owner is there and maybe has hired an employee or two, but the owner is one of the, the chief employee over there, and is making the major decisions about stocking and pricing and hours and so on, remaining on the spot. But if you look at a modern corporation, right, the top decision maker, the CEO, may have some shares, some stake, but it's so typically very, very small, right? The shareholders are a completely different set of people, and they are not involved in the day-to-day operation of the firm. Now, that creates a problem, because what is the guarantee that the top manager, the CEO and his team, will work in the interest of the shareholders, will indeed take decisions which maximize profits for the shareholders? What's the guarantee, right? Why won't they slack off, or why won't they splurge money on big projects from which they themselves gain, etc., etc.? So this gives rise to agency problems, and some branches of economics, like corporate finance, for example, or industrial organization or agency theory, they study how the owners can try and motivate the managers. Because of this separation, that question becomes important. And one can be a little bit skeptical whether managers will always end up maximizing profits for owners, right? That question becomes non-trivial. Again, we'll not get into that. We'll almost pretend that the firms we are studying are kind of like owner-managed firms, right? They are not like modern joint stock companies, but rather owner-managed firms. And then there's a last set of issues which have to do with dynamic and strategic factors. So sometimes firms engage in things like dumping and strategic behavior and predatory pricing and things like that, meaning that, let's say there's a new upstart airlines which comes up, right, and starts running flights between, let's say, Delhi and Mumbai. And it's possible that, the sort of big players like Indigo and all, they try to drive out this airline by selling very cheap tickets for a while, right? So in that kind of predatory behavior, a firm may take losses for a short time in order to increase its profits in the future. Yes. So profit maximization often has a dynamic element, right? To maximize profits over the longer horizon, a firm may find it optimal to not maximize profit in the short term. Right. So there are all these complications, and all of these complications, are studied in fields like industrial organization. But we will not get into all of this. We'll start do a building block by studying a firm in a perfectly competitive market, which is a straightforward profit maximizer. Questions? Okay, so I am almost out of time. You have a class at 11:40, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so tomorrow we'll quickly finish this. I've sent you the slides. I've also sent you problem sets. Yes. So and most of you are familiar with isoquants and some of the basic stuff. So I'll go through it very quickly, and then we'll look at monopoly after that.
Sir,
Yes.
is it possible to have your contact hours sometime later this week?
I'll let you know. Okay, I'll have to really work around my schedule, so I will try to put up contact hours on Wednesday. Yes, instead to tomorrow. So I will make an announcement on the course website.
Okay, sir. And Wednesday is tomorrow, right? So tomorrow.
Oh, so either tomorrow or day after.
Okay, okay, sir.
And I'll try not to be like that procrastinating agent. Every day I say tomorrow. I'll try to give you a firm date and time.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Sir,
Yes.
so can you please tell something about the internals, midterms?
They'll be on that time. Okay, first of all, let me Stop this recording. I've kind of messed it up. You guys can still hear me, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
How do I stop the recording? I'll stop share.